One of the other things in terms of the economy is the downgrade that has now finally taken place from Moody's. It's been on the back of all of our minds for quite a long time. And, Moody's for some time has actually been fairly easy on us in being the last sort of main ratings agency to keep us on that investment grade. They've now downgraded South Africa to junk status. In terms of everyone listening, if you don't know what that means, we'll certainly unpack that for you. But in terms of the reasons for the downgrade, why don't you talk us through it, Barry?
Yeah, so reading directly from Moody's statement, their quote goes as follows: unreliable electricity supply, persistent weak business confidence and investment, as well as a long-standing structural labor market rigidities, continue to constrain South Africa's economic growth. As a result, South Africa is entering a period of much lower global growth in an economically vulnerable position. The government's own capacity to limit the economic deterioration in the current shock and more durably is constrained.
Yeah,
And so that kind of it confirms what we've thought about South Africa for the last year or two.
definitely.
I think this was inevitable. I don't think we could have avoided this kind of downgrade, especially after their competitors of Fitch and S&P have already downgraded us.
Yep.
And so this kind of weak structural growth we've seen in our economy for a while now, and the fact we've gone to another recession, means it's inevitable. And I think Moody's has been very generous with us for a long time by keeping us on investment grade for
Yep.
as long as it did. And unfortunately, in this kind of environment and this kind of global downturn, it was inevitable, I think, Chad.
Absolutely, you're completely right there. Some of the effects of this downgrade and why it is such a big deal for South Africa being the last of the ratings agencies to effect this downgrade is obviously in terms of the funds that are invested in South Africa. A lot of these fund managers have mandates to only invest in investment grade assets, if you'd like, and so a whole lot of these government bonds that these funds have held are now going to have to be sold. So there's going to be large capital outflows. The cost of capital in the country is going to increase. Obviously, if you look at the higher debt levels of South Africa, that cost of servicing that debt is obviously a key thing that we need to keep our eyes on. And I mean, one of the other things, which I suppose in this current climate where there isn't a lot of trade happening anyway, is the value of the rand. We've now seen the pound to the rand hit 22.15 as of this morning. That is the highest level since 2016. Obviously, there's been various other things. The pound has been weak as a result of Brexit, etc. But yeah, I mean that certainly is a level we haven't seen in some time, and likely to just to increase on the back of this, Barry.
Yeah, definitely. It has huge implications, and unfortunately, it's kind of been buried in the news cycle because there's been so much else going on. But it is going to have big impacts on us going forward. One thing I saw on the other side of the coin, though, I read an interesting op-ed by a guy called Vusi Tembakwayo, who I really respect here in South Africa,
Yeah.
and he wrote an article talking about let's try and look at the positive side of junk status. Let's try and look at what this could do for our economy. And his basic thesis was, what if this is an opportunity for us to really become self-sustainable as a South Africa, as a kind of a market, and build an investment ecosystem that really is self-sustainable? And also, what if it focuses us to think about Africa more seriously than just relying on investment from Europe and from the States and from China, etc.? What if it enables us to build a more African ecosystem and kind of forces us to think about our own internal processes, our internal businesses, our internal economic flows, and really try to build a new economy that is more inclusive for everybody? And I thought that was an interesting op-ed to read. I think that it is very optimistic, and it's trying to show what could be the positives. It's a very difficult road to go down, but it just shows that we don't have to be thinking about this in doom and gloom all the time, right? A downgrade status is simply a status change. That's all it is. And so if you're going to just go into nihilism and think, oh, the economy is doomed, then obviously it's going to be doomed. But if you see the opportunities here and you realize, okay, cool, you have to replace those investment flows from somewhere. How do you change your business? How do you change the way your asset manager runs? How do you change the way you look for that funding? And maybe think about Africa as your opportunity rather than those international countries and those first world countries. Maybe there's a way forward. I don't know.
Yeah, potentially. It's an interesting vantage point. If you look at Nigeria, a really strong economy in Africa that's really come a long way in the last couple of years. Potentially, South Africa gets some flows from there. But yeah, a really interesting one. One statement that I saw coming out from the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, on Friday evening, which I thought was really interesting ahead of this potential downgrade, was he said Therefore, to say we are not concerned and trembling in our boots about what might be in the coming weeks and months is an understatement. And I think this is kind of the time that we're living in right now. Everyone, not just unique to this downgrade, is really just that uncertainty. What is it about us as a human race that needs to know exactly what's happening in the next coming days, the next coming months? It's this uncertainty that makes us so scared.
Yeah, I think it's the downside of being human, right? As human beings, we have this ability to foresee into the future and to think about the future. Every other animal in the animal kingdom kind of just deals with their present, and they kind of deal with what's happening right now, and they're beyond, say, a day or two. They don't have much idea what a future looks like. As a human being, we've developed this cortex that gives us an idea of, okay, cool, we can think about the future.
Yep.
What that does is it's good, obviously, because we can plan and we can think more long term, and that's been crucial to the survival of our species. But it also allows us to worry about things in the future. And because when things are uncertain and you look at kind of what's going to happen in the next couple of months, there are 1,000 different possibilities, and a lot of them are pretty bad. Yep. And it's easy to get caught up in that thinking about what might happen, like worrying about what's going to come down the pipe. And I think what's important for us as individuals, like on a macro basis, I think people have to think very skeptically and very forecast very conservatively in the next little bit to make sure they are prepared and they make sure they know what's coming down the pipe potentially. But as individuals, I think it's important that we think more short term, think about what can we do today to create the future that we want for ourselves. I think as businesses, like a lot of people are thinking now about how do they change their business? How do they reinvent themselves now from working from home? How do they reinvent their products, which now can't be delivered like they used to be? And if you're going to sit down and just worry about what's going to come a year down the line, you're going to drive yourself crazy, right? But if you're able to sit down and think, cool, how can we create a future for ourselves? How can we change that business in a way that's going to make us more future-proof to these sorts of black swan events in the future? This pandemic is not going to be the last thing that's going to happen in this world. We're going to have lots of these things happen over our lifetime. And so your ability to adapt to this change, your ability to remain positive and remain kind of resilient in this time is really what's going to separate the boys from the men. And it's going to show what businesses and what people are going to survive in these uncertain times. Because uncertainty is not new and it's not going to go away. We're going to have these moments in our life. We're going to have these moments in our economy. And it's how you react to those situations that's going to determine the quality of your life or your business.
Absolutely. And if you were in that forward-looking stage a couple of years ago and planned for some sort of crazy eventuality like this, you would be actually sitting in a good position right now. So it's that balance between looking ahead and planning and kind of putting into place steps that will help us improve the way we deal with things versus just worrying and actually not taking action. I think that's the distinction. So yeah, it's certainly interesting to see how some of those businesses are pivoting at this time. I'd like to see a bit more of it. I think a lot of work can be done from home. I think a lot of companies are just, as you say, in that uncertain stage where they're just putting holds on all recruitments. They've got projects that they're busy on, but they're just putting them on hold indefinitely, which I think is a bit silly. I think, just trust people to get on with the job at home. It's possible. Yeah, we just need to see people making some calls on that basis.
Across the pond with Barry and Chad.